Story 1. Gambling addiction is not discussed often enough. Unlike other addictions, gambling offers the possibility that participation can lead to a positive outcome. With substances like drugs, sugar, and alcohol, there is a short-term reward of feeling good. However, with gambling, the prospect of winning and alleviating debt can lead to deeper financial troubles. No matter how much you lose, the next gamble could be the one that resolves all past problems caused by gambling, making it challenging to set boundaries. Story 2. Alcohol is everywhere and is considered socially acceptable, making it challenging to avoid completely. Additionally, once you become dependent on it, quitting abruptly or withdrawing without medical assistance can be life-threatening. Most other substances do not carry the same risks. Story 3. The real answers: heroin, opioids, methamphetamine, cocaine. The Reddit answers: scrolling through social media, caffeine, candy. Story 4. Alcohol and benzodiazepines can both lead to life-threatening withdrawal symptoms. Additionally, obtaining drugs such as opioids or methamphetamine requires more effort than simply visiting a convenience store. Story 5. Addiction is like having a wild, untamed tiger in your home. If you're addicted to drugs, you can lock it in a cage and walk away. If you're addicted to food, you have to take that tiger out and walk it 3 to 5 times a day. Story 6. Under every addiction is the search for love and emotional security. Story 7. Food-related addictions, such as overeating and binge eating, are complex. It is possible to quit alcohol or cocaine, though it may not be easy. However, you cannot simply quit food. Story 8. I would say food. Anything you are addicted to, but also need in a certain quantity to survive, is tough to manage. You cannot abstain from food the way you can abstain from alcohol or drugs. It is very difficult to manage. Story 9. Here is my top 5 list, ranked by difficulty to quit. 1. Nicotine, highly addictive and easy to use. It does not interfere much with daily activities. Alcohol, ingrained in culture and creates physical dependence. It is also very accessible. Food and sugar, quitting is challenging, making it more complicated psychologically. Caffeine, similar to nicotine in many ways. Pornography, taboo, with a lack of cultural rules and norms around its use. People often gain access at a very young age, which can lead to various problems. Story 10. For me, alcohol was the most painful to stop. Benzodiazepines lasted the longest, and through microtapering, it took about 5 months of feeling like I had a cold to quit. Nicotine is generally the most annoying to stop because it is not considered as harmful and persistently lingers in the background, unlike alcohol or benzodiazepines, which dominated my mental landscape during my addiction. Story 11. I have seen heroin, meth, cocaine, benzodiazepine addicts, and severe alcoholics experience dramatic changes with just a few days of treatment. I have witnessed the profound misery of fentanyl recovery, and it is on a completely different level. It is definitely fentanyl. Story 12. Food is challenging, and I say that as a fit person with other addictions. You can stop gambling, drinking, or using heroin altogether. However, you need to eat. Story 13. I have experienced addictions to cannabis, GHB, benzodiazepines, opioids, and stimulants, but smoking was the hardest one to quit. Story 14. I am a sober alcoholic. I have been sober from alcohol for 3 years, and I drank every day for 7 years of my life. The physical and psychological addiction to alcohol was the hardest thing I have ever had to overcome. Story 15. My brother overcame a 10-year heroin addiction but could never quit cigarettes, so I'm going to say tobacco. Story 16. Sugar. I have overcome addictions to opioids, nicotine, and alcohol, but I cannot overcome my addiction to sugar. It is present in everything, and realistically, I will probably never be able to live completely refined sugar-free. Story 17. I am 4 years clean from opiates. My drug of choice was morphine. Opiate withdrawal was difficult, but I believe that being addicted to food is a worse addiction. Look at our obesity epidemic. People still keep eating. It's hard for many to understand that they are addicted to food. Most individuals won't take the necessary steps to get healthy. Story 18. I have recovered from heroin, opiates, alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, and food, particularly sugar. To be honest, I found nicotine and sugar to be the most challenging. Heroin was relatively easier in comparison. Additionally, some of my friends in recovery talk about prescription medication addiction, which I believe is often underrated. Story 19, food as a whole. You must confront your addiction while still managing an active dependency. Intermittent reinforcement produces the highest rate of behavior, making it more likely to relapse with a food addiction because you need access to it for survival. Story 20. Love bombing is becoming addicted to the rush of a new relationship and jumping from person to person in search of that initial high. It took me 3 toxic relationships to realize I was chasing the wrong thing. Story 21. Validation from others. I spent my 20s morphing into whatever person someone wanted me to be. A different boyfriend meant a different personality. A new friend group brought about new interests. I underwent intense therapy to finally discover who I truly am. Story 22. Love and sex are healthy parts of life. You don't necessarily abstain but learn to moderate and evaluate your own behavior and obsessive qualities around them. Story 23. I quit drugs and alcohol more than 3 years ago. December 9th is my sober anniversary. However, to this day I haven't managed to quit. 1. Pornography. 2. Nicotine. 3. Junk food, in that order. I have managed to quit those 3 for months at a time, but I can't seem to avoid relapse. It's becoming quite distressing at this point. Story 24. Crystal meth and heroin are among the most difficult hard drugs. In comparison, substances like caffeine, pornography, marijuana addiction, and nicotine are relatively minor. Story 25. I was addicted to opioids for 9 years, but I have been clean and sober for 36 weeks. Therefore, my answer is obvious: opioids. Story 26. There are 2 contenders for the title of the most difficult addiction to overcome these days: drugs and cell phones. Cell phones can be particularly challenging to manage because, in today's world, they are often unavoidable, even in the workplace. While they may not be life-threatening like drugs, they can still have detrimental effects on health. On the other hand, overcoming drug addiction is possible with determination and effort, but relapse can occur. Therefore, both addictions are fiercely competing for the title of the most difficult to conquer. Story 27. Define difficult. Opioids and heroin are the most addictive and hardest to quit. Food-related addictions and internet use are the most challenging to avoid since food is a necessity and the internet is often required for work. Story 28. The one with not so obvious negative side effects at first is cannabis. Initially, you might think, oh, this is harmless. But suddenly you find yourself using it every day and unable to enjoy a sober life anymore. Story 29. Well, difficult is the operative word here. Difficult to what? Difficult to stop? Difficult to manage or function with? I'll go with stop first. There are basically 4 substances that come to mind. Rank them how you want: methamphetamine, nicotine, heroin/opioids, alcohol. I don't know which of these is the hardest or most difficult. I can only speak to one: alcohol. The difficult part is the withdrawal and availability issues. It's very easy to get drunk. The other 3 are hard to quit because of the mental and physical withdrawal. I've known friends who were addicted to them. If I had to put one above the rest, it would be nicotine. I have a friend who at one point was addicted to all 4, and years later, the only one he can't kick is nicotine. Now let's break down managing. Managing nicotine and alcohol is obviously much easier than managing methamphetamine or heroin/opioids. There are plenty of people addicted to smoking or drinking who continue until the day they die and live to be 80. Methamphetamine and heroin can be fatal if used long enough. I would say heroin because I don't know anyone who managed to be a regular user and lived longer than 1 to 2 years. My overall advice? Stay away from all 4. Story 30. Probably alcohol. It is advertised everywhere, it is considered socially acceptable, you can die from withdrawals, and it harms your internal organs. Story 31. Many people say that sugar enjoyed a privileged life. Have you ever seen someone struggling with addiction in Brownsville or East New York? or the impact of methamphetamine and fentanyl in the Bronx. Story 32. I would argue that food is not as immediately dangerous, but it can still be deadly if consumed excessively. The challenge is that you can't simply quit food. You can't wean off it or go cold turkey. You need to keep incorporating it into your daily life. You just have to learn to consume the right amount, which can be quite difficult. Story 33. According to most rehabilitation facilities, it is alcohol. Alcohol is the only drug on the planet where withdrawal can be fatal. While drugs like heroin might make you feel like you're going to die, alcohol is the only one that can actually kill you if you have been addicted long enough and consuming enough of it. This is because alcohol metabolizes into enzymes that your body needs and normally produces itself. However, if you consume enough of it regularly, your body stops producing those enzymes, as it has a reliable and more efficient source. If you are heavily addicted and suddenly stop, your body may not be able to ramp up enzyme production quickly enough, which can be lethal. It is legal, affordable, and widely available. No other substance, except perhaps cigarettes, is as difficult to avoid. Even the smallest town is likely to have a bar, and unlike cigarettes, alcohol is openly advertised everywhere. It is one of the few addictive substances that is actively encouraged by society. Even cigarettes don't have that luxury. If you don't smoke, people generally don't question it. However, if you don't drink, it often raises questions and can lead to judgment. Not only do you face the stigma of having an addiction, which is challenging enough, but you also encounter additional judgment and pressure for simply not drinking. No one is likely to shame you for not using heroin, but people will often try to pressure you to just have a glass of wine to be polite at dinner. Story 34. Alcohol is legal and socially accepted, and you can obtain it easily. However, withdrawals can be severe and dangerous. Story 35. Excessive wealth can corrupt individuals to the point where they may betray others for financial gain. Some might even exploit their own family members for a small amount of money. This pursuit of quick profits can lead to the destruction of beauty, lives, and relationships, all in the name of their addiction to wealth. Story 36. Smoking was really tough for me to quit because more people smoked back then, and you could buy them anywhere. I dislike cigarettes. Story 37. Gambling, alcohol, methamphetamine, and heroin. This varies based on the definition of most difficult. AOD support worker. Story 38. I had an addiction to adrenaline, where I would speed recklessly every night. I never realized it was an addiction until I stopped, and then the challenges began. I couldn't even imagine that you could have withdrawal symptoms from something like this. It took 4 months to slowly start recovering. To this day, it still doesn't make sense to me that something like speeding could cause this. Story 39. Social media can fill your heart with hate, and some people become consumed by it. I see this frequently, especially among those who have no friends or hobbies. In my opinion, social media is worse than any drug. Story 40. Food is essential, and you do not need to drink, smoke, or gamble. Once you become aware of your addiction, you can change your life to reduce or limit your exposure. You need to eat, so you face your addiction every day. Story 41. Every addiction is hard if the person's mind is not ready to make changes. Heroin requires a counter-drug to assist individuals in overcoming their dependence, which sounds quite intense to me. Story 42. Food. As a person who has struggled with weight, the only addiction I can't escape is food, because I have to eat to survive. I smoked and quit, drank and quit. All other addictions I can change, but I can't simply stop eating. Story 43. On the legal side of things, any of these three, alcohol, nicotine, or gambling, can pose challenges. You need to be mentally strong to stay away from them, as all it takes is a trip to the corner store to get your fix. The same goes for gambling. It requires willpower to avoid going to a casino to play. Story 44. It is difficult to say without being addicted to them all, but smoking is the most addictive substance. Just one puff is enough to get you hooked for life. All of these substances are harmful and have claimed more lives than all the wars combined, I imagine. Story 45. It depends on what you mean by difficult. If you mean difficult to quit, Anything that requires medical intervention to stop safely, such as alcohol, is going to be more complicated than things that do not require that. If you mean difficult in general, it really depends on the person. Story 46. Relationships. I have been in one for most of my life. Now I am single, and without intimacy, life feels as though it has no meaning anymore. Story 47. Cigarettes and coffee are both common at Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, where participants are trying to quit other substances mentioned in this discussion. Story 48. For me, it was nicotine. I quit in 2000. Back then, smoking everywhere and at any time was fully accepted. The hardest thing I've ever quit, hands down. Story 49. Porn addiction. And I say this as someone who once had an alcohol addiction as well. The issue with porn addiction is that sexuality is promoted everywhere by everyone. You fall into a trap because no one wants to admit that something that feels good and doesn't cause physical harm is actually damaging, and thus it doesn't receive the attention that substance addiction does. I struggled with it for a while, and it nearly ruined a relationship for me. You begin to see other people through a different lens. Your first thought of another person becomes, what do they look like naked? Or something else inappropriate, instead of wondering about their personality, passions, or any other aspect of their individuality. Breaking through an addiction that exists in your mind and not your body was far more difficult for me. Story 50. Cigarettes are by far the most harmful. Even those who have quit smoking are now using e-cigarettes, acting as if it's any different or better. Story 51. I'm focusing on social media. Today, I only use this platform and LinkedIn. However, years ago, I had multiple accounts. It took me a while to realize the negative impact they were having on my life. I spent several hours looking at all the accounts I had, constantly comparing my life to others and feeling inadequate. I believed that others had better lives and that I wasn't allowed to be happy. I couldn't stop. I was receiving notifications all day and night, emotionally invested in the news and aware of all the latest trends. I didn't realize how torturous it was to watch others' lives seem better than mine. By consuming the latest breaking news stories, I was inviting negativity into my daily life. Finally, I closed my Facebook account and noticed a few changes quickly. I wasn't getting caught up in the anger of the news, nor was I upset with myself for not having a better life. Eventually, I closed the rest of the accounts. My overall mental health has significantly improved. The news is outrageous enough as it is. I don't need the influence of others' outrage in my life to make me upset. Story 52. I would say maybe alcohol. All addictions are challenging, but alcohol has the additional factor of being legal and widely available. It is also consistently depicted in media and advertising, making it particularly hard to forget. Furthermore, unlike many other substances, such as heroin, where withdrawal can be unpleasant but not life-threatening, quitting alcohol suddenly can actually be fatal. Story 53. All of them are harmful if you have predispositions. Methamphetamine and heroin are particularly detrimental. Additionally, caffeine and nicotine can also have negative effects. Story 54. Maladaptive daydreaming. No matter how much I try to stop, I just can't. My life is so boring and miserable, which is why I struggle with it. Story 55. Sex. You want to have a healthy sex life, but also don't want to engage in the dangerous behaviors that your addiction may lead to. With most addictions, it's possible to somewhat avoid the object of your addiction, but sex is prevalent everywhere. Story 56. Sugar gives me more of a hit than alcohol and nicotine ever have. Nicotine actually hospitalized me as I had it in an edible form. Alcohol I can drink to bury my feelings, but I can just stop. Sugar I use to quell anxiety and emotional discomfort, and it's cheap. For the price of a cheap bottle of alcohol, around 12 pounds, I can buy 4 share bags of Cadbury's buttons, approximately 3 pounds, without my discount at work, and have them across 4 days. If I bought them all together, though, I'd likely eat 2 bags in a day. That's 80 pieces times 2. I don't know how much that is in intake, but it's a miracle I'm not diabetic or needing fillings yet. Recently, I've been struggling again and had a bag of 4 cookies and a full pack of angel cakes. I'm slim and weigh 65 kilograms at 5 feet 11 inches. I manage my figure, but emotionally and financially, it's a regular habit that, combined with adult material, ruins me inside. I don't need those things. I need to deal with what's bothering me. Story 57. Cigarettes. The number of videos I have seen of smokers using tracheostomy indicates that nicotine is highly addictive. Even cancer or chronic lung conditions do not deter some of these smokers, as they are deeply addicted. It is truly horrifying. Story 58. I remember a quote from someone on television who was really obese. They mentioned that you can't quit food all at once or go cold turkey because you need to survive. However, you do not need alcohol, cigarettes, or drugs. Story 59. Addiction to validation. When your self-worth depends on constant approval from others, it is a difficult cycle to break, and it is everywhere, especially with social media. Story 60. Food can subtly destroy your life. You may avoid drinking, smoking, or gambling, which is tough, but you must eat every single day. Research has shown that we make over 250 food-related choices daily. Imagine having to avoid drinking, smoking, or gambling 250 times a day. It would be overwhelming. Story 61. I've done everything and got addicted to the worst one, nitrous oxide, commonly known as whippets or laughing gas. It started as a fun party drug, but it became too available and turned into a $300 per day habit for about a year. I tried to stop many times but kept relapsing until I called my mom and told her I had a problem. It was the hardest phone call I've ever made, and it hurt me deeply to have caused her pain. I was finally able to stop. For years clean now. I joke about having no sense of dignity, but I can't shake how embarrassed I still feel about this experience. Story 62. I don't discredit people who suffer from heroin or cocaine addiction, but I will not speak on it because I have never experienced it. However, I believe that pornography is something everyone should avoid. It can be harmful. Story 63. Feeling invincible after being sober for a few weeks. I convinced myself that I was cured and that it was time to celebrate with beer. Story 64. Sugar. Everyone jokes about being addicted to sweets, but I genuinely struggled to quit. I went cold turkey 3 years ago, and the first month was absolute hell. My hands would shake when I walked past the bakery section at the grocery store. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.